One of the most frustrating things about trying to lose fat is doing everything you think you're supposed to do and still seeing no results. You're exercising regularly. You're making healthier food choices. You're trying to stay consistent. Yet every time you step on the scale, nothing seems to change. If you've ever felt like giving up because your hard work isn't paying off, I completely understand. But before you blame your genetics, your age, or your metabolism, there's something important you need to know. In most cases, the real problem isn't what you're doing. It's a few hidden mistakes you don't even realize you're making. Let's start with the most common mistake of all, and it's probably not what you think. Most people who struggle to lose fat genuinely believe they're not eating very much. In fact, if you ask them how many calories they consume in a day, many would confidently tell you they're eating less than enough to lose weight. But here's where things get interesting. Research has repeatedly shown that people tend to dramatically underestimate how much they're actually eating. And we're not talking about being off by 50 or 100 calories. In some cases, the difference can be hundreds or even over 1,000 calories per day. Think about a typical healthy meal. A couple slices of whole grain toast, some avocado, a drizzle of olive oil. Sounds harmless, right? But when you add everything together, that meal may contain far more calories than most people realize. The same thing happens throughout the day. A spoonful of peanut butter, a little salad dressing, a splash of cooking oil, a few bites of someone else's snack. Individually, they seem insignificant. But together, they can completely erase the calorie deficit you thought you were creating. And that's the dangerous part. Most people don't realize they're overeating because they're not overeating on purpose. They're simply guessing. The solution isn't to become obsessed with every calorie forever. But for at least a few weeks, tracking your food intake accurately can be incredibly eye-opening. It allows you to replace assumptions with facts. And once you see what's really happening, you'll understand why so many people believe they're stuck when, in reality, they're much closer to success than they think. But even if your calories are perfectly tracked, there's another mistake that can make it look like you're making no progress at all. Now let's talk about something that has caused countless people to quit their fat loss journey far too early: the scale. Imagine this. You've been eating better for 2 weeks. You've cut back on snacks. You're exercising consistently. You've stayed disciplined. Then one morning you step on the scale expecting good news and somehow you've gained a pound. Instantly, frustration kicks in. You start questioning everything. Is this diet even working? Maybe my metabolism is broken. Maybe I'm just one of those people who can't lose weight. But here's what most people don't realize. Your body weight naturally fluctuates every single day. Water retention, sodium intake, carbohydrate consumption, stress, sleep quality, even the timing of your last meal can temporarily change the number you see on the scale. That's why relying on a single weigh-in can be incredibly misleading. Think of your body weight like the stock market. If you only looked at one random day, you might think everything is going terribly. But when you zoom out and look at the overall trend, a completely different picture appears. This is exactly what happens during fat loss. Your weight may bounce up and down throughout the week, while still trending downward over time. That's why one of the simplest changes you can make is weighing yourself every morning under the same conditions and tracking your weekly average rather than obsessing over individual numbers. Suddenly, the emotional roller coaster disappears. You stop reacting to daily fluctuations, and you start seeing what is actually happening. But even people who track their calories accurately and monitor their weight properly often make another hidden mistake, one that can completely wipe out their calorie deficit without them even realizing it. The next mistake is especially dangerous because it feels completely logical. Let's say you finish a tough workout. You're sweating, exhausted, and proud of yourself. Maybe you spent 45 minutes on the treadmill or pushed through an intense cardio session. Naturally, you think, I just burned a ton of calories. I've earned a little extra food. And that's where the problem begins. Research has consistently found that people tend to overestimate the number of calories they burn during exercise. In some cases, the overestimation can be surprisingly large. Even fitness trackers, smartwatches, and cardio machines can provide numbers that are far from perfectly accurate. Now imagine what happens next. Your watch says you burned 600 calories. You reward yourself with a snack. Then another small treat later in the day. Without realizing it, You've eaten back most or even all of the calories your workout created. The worst part? You still feel like you've done everything right. After all, you exercised. You were active. You deserved it. But fat loss doesn't care about effort. It responds to energy balance. This is why many people find themselves trapped in a frustrating cycle. They work hard in the gym, feel hungrier afterward, eat more to compensate, and then wonder why the scale never moves. A much smarter approach is to separate your workouts from your food decisions. Instead of trying to earn calories through exercise, stick to a consistent calorie target and a consistent workout routine. Then let your weekly weight trend tell you whether adjustments are needed, because once you stop guessing and start following the data, progress becomes much easier to predict. But what if you're actually losing fat, and the scale still isn't moving? That's where the next hidden mistake surprises almost everyone. Now let's talk about a mistake that causes more confusion than almost anything else in fat loss. Imagine you've been following your plan for several weeks. You're tracking your food, you're training consistently, you're getting stronger in the gym. Your clothes fit a little better. Yet when you step on the scale, the number hasn't changed. Most people immediately assume something is wrong. They think, if my weight isn't dropping, then I'm not losing fat. But that's not always true. In fact, for many people, especially beginners, people returning after a long break, or those who have recently improved their nutrition and training habits, something very different may be happening. It's called body recomposition. This is when your body is losing fat while simultaneously building muscle. And here's why that matters. Fat and muscle affect your body very differently. As fat decreases, your waist may get smaller. Your clothes may fit better. Your muscles may look more defined. But if you're also gaining muscle at the same time, the scale may barely move. Think about it this way. If you lose 5 pounds of fat but gain 5 pounds of muscle, your body has changed dramatically, but your scale weight stays exactly the same. That's why relying only on the scale can be incredibly misleading. Instead, you need to look at the bigger picture. Are you getting stronger? Are your progress photos improving? Is your waist measurement decreasing? Do you look leaner in the mirror? These signs often tell the real story long before the scale does. And this is where successful people separate themselves from everyone else. They stop obsessing over one number and start tracking multiple indicators of progress. Because when you understand what to measure, you'll finally realize whether you're truly stuck or whether you're actually making more progress than you think. At this point, you may have noticed something interesting. Every hidden mistake we've covered so far has one thing in common. They all come back to a single word: tracking. And I know what you're thinking. Tracking sounds boring. It sounds tedious. It sounds like something only bodybuilders and fitness fanatics would do. But here's the truth. Tracking isn't about becoming obsessed with numbers. It's about removing guesswork. Imagine trying to drive across the country without a map, a GPS, or even road signs. You might eventually reach your destination, but you'd waste an incredible amount of time making wrong turns along the way. That's exactly what happens when people try to lose fat without tracking anything. When progress stalls, they have no idea why. Should they eat less? Should they do more cardio? Should they change their workout routine? Nobody knows because there's no data. Now compare that to someone who tracks a few simple things. They know how many calories they're eating. They know their average weekly weight. They know whether their strength is increasing or decreasing. They have progress photos and waist measurements to compare. Suddenly, every plateau becomes easier to solve. If their weight hasn't changed for several weeks, they can make a small adjustment. If their waist is shrinking but their weight is stable, they know body recomposition may be occurring. If strength is dropping rapidly, they know recovery or nutrition may need attention. Instead of feeling confused, they feel in control. And that's the biggest difference. Successful fat loss isn't about being perfect. It's about collecting enough information to make better decisions. Because once you stop guessing and start measuring, you finally gain the ability to identify exactly what's holding you back and exactly how to fix it. Now, before we finish, there's one final message I want you to remember. And honestly, it may be the most important lesson in this entire video. The reason so many people fail at fat loss isn't because they lack motivation. It isn't because they aren't working hard enough. And it certainly isn't because they're genetically doomed. Most people fail because they quit too soon. Think about what happens when someone starts a diet. They expect immediate results. They expect the scale to drop every week. They expect their body to change quickly. And when that doesn't happen, frustration takes over. They assume the plan isn't working. They jump to a new diet, a new workout, a new supplement, a new shortcut. But successful fat loss rarely works that way. The people who achieve lasting results aren't necessarily the most disciplined. They're often the people who stay consistent long enough to let the process work. They understand that progress isn't always visible from day to day. Some weeks the scale drops. Some weeks it doesn't. Some weeks you feel amazing. Some weeks you feel stuck. That's normal. What matters is the overall trend. And when you have the right data, your calories, your weight averages, your strength levels, your measurements, you no longer have to rely on feelings. You can rely on evidence. That's incredibly powerful, because evidence removes doubt. It replaces frustration with confidence, and confidence makes consistency much easier. So if you're currently struggling to lose fat despite your efforts, don't immediately assume you're broken or that your body is somehow different. Take a step back. Look at the data. Identify the hidden mistake. Make one small adjustment. Then give it time. Because in many cases, you're not as far from success as you think. You simply need a clearer picture of what's actually happening. Let's quickly put everything we've covered together. If you're not losing fat despite your best efforts, the answer is usually not some mysterious metabolic problem. More often than not, it's one of a handful of hidden mistakes that are quietly working against you. Maybe you're eating more calories than you realize. Maybe hidden calories are slipping into your meals throughout the day. Maybe you're letting normal scale fluctuations convince you that nothing is working. Maybe you're eating back the calories you think you've burned through exercise. Or maybe you're actually losing fat and gaining muscle at the same time without realizing it. The good news is that every one of these problems has a solution. And notice something interesting. None of those solutions require a special supplement. None require a crash diet. None require starving yourself. Instead, they all come back to awareness. Awareness of your calorie intake. Awareness of your body weight trends. Awareness of your training progress. Awareness of what your body is actually doing instead of what you assume it's doing. That's why the most successful people in fitness aren't necessarily the smartest, the most gifted, or the most motivated. They're often the people who are simply paying attention. They collect data, they make adjustments, and they stay patient. Because fat loss isn't about finding the perfect plan. It's about finding the mistake that's currently holding you back. And once you identify that mistake, progress often happens much faster than you expect. So, before you quit on yourself, before you jump to another diet, and before you convince yourself that your body can't change, take a step back and ask one simple question. What if the problem isn't my effort, but a hidden mistake I haven't noticed yet? That single question could completely change the direction of your fat loss journey. Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final perspective that completely changed the way I think about fat loss. Most people treat fat loss like a test. Every day feels like pass or fail. If the scale goes down, they feel successful. If the scale stays the same, they feel discouraged. If they have one bad meal, they feel like they've ruined everything. But that's the wrong way to look at it. Fat loss isn't a test. It's an experiment. And every experiment gives you information. Let's say your weight hasn't changed for a month. Many people see that as failure. But what if it's actually valuable feedback? Maybe your calorie intake is higher than you thought. Maybe you're eating back exercise calories. Maybe you're retaining water. Maybe you're building muscle while losing fat. Each possibility gives you a clue about what to adjust next. That's how successful people approach the process. They don't get emotional about the data. They get curious about it. Instead of saying, "Why isn't this working?" they ask, "What is this result trying to tell me?" That small shift in mindset can make an enormous difference. Because frustration often causes people to quit. Curiosity causes people to learn. And learning leads to progress. The truth is, your body is always giving you feedback. Your weight trend, your measurements, your strength, your energy levels, your progress photos. The answers are usually there if you're willing to pay attention. So the next time you feel stuck, resist the urge to give up. Take a step back, review the data, look for the hidden mistake, make a small adjustment, then keep going. Because fat loss success rarely belongs to the person who finds the perfect plan. It belongs to the person who keeps learning until the plan works. So let's bring everything together. When most people hit a fat loss plateau, their first instinct is to look for something new. A new diet, a new supplement, a new workout program, a new shortcut that promises faster results. But after everything we've covered in this video, you can probably see why that approach often fails. The problem usually isn't that you need a completely different plan. The problem is that something within your current plan isn't being measured, understood, or adjusted correctly. Maybe you're underestimating your calorie intake. Maybe you're focusing on daily scale fluctuations instead of weekly trends. Maybe you're eating back the calories you burn. Maybe you're experiencing body recomposition and don't realize it. Or maybe you're simply expecting results faster than your body can realistically produce them. And that's why the most successful people don't constantly restart. They refine, they observe, they adjust, then they continue moving forward. Remember, your body follows biological principles, not emotions. It doesn't care whether you're frustrated. It doesn't care whether you feel stuck. It responds to your habits, your energy balance, your activity levels, and your consistency over time. That's actually good news, because it means progress isn't random. It's predictable. Once you learn how to track the right variables and identify the hidden mistakes that are slowing you down, fat loss becomes far less confusing. So, if you're currently feeling discouraged, don't quit. Don't assume your body is broken. Don't assume you're destined to fail. Instead, take a step back and audit your process. Because sometimes the difference between staying stuck and finally seeing results isn't a massive change. It's finding the one small mistake that's been hiding in plain sight all along. And once you fix that mistake, everything can start moving in the right direction.